Welcome to Superwoman Life. I'm Kate Beddow, and if you know me, you know that one of the things that I'm known for is my smile. I love smiling, I love making other people smile, and it's just a really important part of who I am. My guest today is Dipti Tait. She is a hypnotherapist and she's a fabulous author of a book called Good Grief and another book that's due out next year called Planet Grief. Sorry, Dipti. So Planet Grief is due out next year. And I know that those books are amazing. I know lots of people that Good Grief has helped, so that's fabulous. But the thing that I find really fascinating about Dipti is that she lost her smile. And I can't ever imagine not being able to smile at somebody. So I wanted to talk to Dipti today about smiling, amongst other things, because you are a proper superhero, because you've got your smile back.
Yay!
Smile! Hi, Dipti.
I know, and it's a weird thing to say that you've lost your smile. It's like, where did you put it? Like, did you leave it at home?
Well, it's what we say to children, isn't it? If a child's looking really sad, we go, "Oh, have you lost your smile?"
Yeah.
You know. But for you, it was a bit more serious, wasn't it? So just give us a little bit of background, Dipti, about what you went through and how you came to lose your smile.
Yes, I'm not that scatty, honestly. I didn't get out of bed one morning and leave my smile on the pillow. Well, actually, I kind of did. It did happen like that. So it was 2013, the year I was about to turn 40, and I had just about finished qualifying as a hypnotherapist. So it was my last month in training, and my lecturer has kind of got this really interesting version of how you should conduct yourself as a hypnotherapist, and he said, now that you're all qualifying as hypnotherapists, you can say goodbye to the holiday. You don't need to go on holiday anymore. Your clients are far more important, and you'll be so happy in your life you won't ever need a holiday. Your whole life will be I know. And I was like, what? I'm not allowed to go on holiday, so immediately booked a holiday.
So that's the sort of thing I do.
Toby and I, my partner Toby, and I went to Turkey, and we were there, and I just started feeling really unwell. And I thought maybe it's because I've been working so hard and, trying to train as a hypnotherapist and do everything in the background and looking after my children. And, it was all a bit intense. My mum had died as well in 2000, end of 11, so I was grieving, so there's a lot going on, and I just thought maybe I'm just really run down. When you go on holiday and you're just like, your body just goes, no, that's it, get ill now, but it was a bit more than that. I just couldn't function properly. Anyway, by the time we got back from Turkey, it was Easter weekend, and I sat down to eat my Easter dinner, and suddenly tried to put the fork in my mouth, and I couldn't open my mouth. It's like my jaw just kind of froze. It was just the weirdest thing, and it kind of felt like I'd been to the dentist, so that I had this feeling of complete numbness, around my lips, tingling in my lips. And then after a few hours, this tingling just kind of spread across the whole of my face. And I've never had Botox, but I would imagine that's what happens if you Botox your whole face. It just completely paralysed my whole face. And then we were by the end of the day, I actually had no face. I couldn't move any of it. So, because it was Easter weekend, the skeleton staff in the hospital, when we got there, they were a bit like, we've never seen this before, don't know what it is. Maybe it's Bell's palsy, but that's not usual because it's usually one side of the face. Not it was very symmetrical. Maybe you've had a stroke. So they did all this testing, but it didn't look like I'd had a stroke. And then they were like, actually, we really don't know what to do with you. Can you go away and come back on Tuesday? Because we haven't got any beds. So then that's what happened. I went away. I couldn't eat. I couldn't speak. Obviously, I couldn't move my face, so I couldn't smile. Long story short, I was like that for 9 months. And I had meningitis. Yeah, but it was misdiagnosed. And so I didn't know I had meningitis until I got better.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That must have been absolutely terrifying. I mean,
Yeah.
to not be able to smile is one thing. To not be able to communicate, to not be able to eat, you know, I mean, you must have just felt like you were trapped inside your own body.
Yeah, I was. And I also was supposed to be starting this business of being a hypnotherapist and getting clients through the door. And obviously the whole point of hypnotherapy is communication.
Yeah.
And so I actually, everything had to, stop. I had to go into kind of freeze mode, really. But looking back now, so it's 7 years, isn't it? I wouldn't change it.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I learned so much about myself and also so much about hypnotherapy and power of it. And the thing I found the hardest is the pattern matching thing. So we've got mirror neurons in our brain. And so I'm very smiley as a person like you are. So you probably find that when you're walking around, you're not obviously thinking, now I'm going to smile at that person walking up to me. You just find yourself smiling, don't you? Don't really think about it or analyze it. And then, of course, someone sees you smiling, they'll smile back at you. And so therefore, if you're not smiling, because you can't, no one smiles at you.
Yeah.
So I found
really hard because you don't have that external support then, do you? You know, part of the way that we feel cared for is by seeing random strangers in the street smiling back at us.
Yeah.
And to not have that validation must be really hard.
But to be fair, I looked really grumpy because I had this very neutral, like almost like a Victoria Beckham kind of, resting bitch look. I kind of had that, and I don't normally have a resting bitch face. So for 9 months, I had this brilliant resting bitch face. And so obviously people were a bit like, oh, what's up with her, And I felt like I could draw a sign on my head saying, I've lost my smile. Please don't be offended or just smile at me. So I just found myself plunged into resting bitch world. I mean, it seems funny now, but at the time it was really depressing.
And such a long time as well. I mean, we're not talking about, it happened on the Monday and by the Friday you were back to normal. 9 months is an awful long time.
Yeah, it was a long time. And I mean, it did come back in that 9 months, but it was coming back wonky. So then I looked like I had a stroke, actually. And bearing in mind also, I had turned 40. This had happened in March, started in March. My birthday, my 40th birthday, which I'd planned a massive bash, was in May. So I basically had to I didn't cancel it. I'm glad I didn't now. But obviously at the time I was thinking, I'm going to be a resting bitch for my birthday party photos. But I did have... I just kind of got on with it. But by then it was starting to get wonky. So my 40th birthday video and photos just look a bit like odd.
Obviously, as you know, I went through big facial changes when I had my tumour. And I didn't lose my smile. I lost my sparkle. I know that sounds really weird, but I was so tired and in so much pain, and my face had changed shape so much that my eyes didn't sparkle anymore. And when I smiled, it wasn't my smile. And it's a really strange thing. I mean, Laura was only a baby, our daughter, and Ian graduated, so we went to all his graduation ball and everything. So we've got all these pictures. The only time we've ever been to a black tie-do together, we've got all these official pictures, and I just look at them and go, oh, who's that? Because it's really difficult. And I think because not many people experience physical changes to that extent. You know, I mean, obviously a lot of people might put on a lot of weight and then lose it again and that sort of thing. So that's a similar thing, but it's not quite the same as your actual features changing and losing that control over your own body, is it? I think that's the difference.
And yeah, exactly. And the thing is about your face, it's a really weird thing to think about your face, but you can't see your face. You can see every other bit of your body apart from your face and your ears and and the back of your head, unless you use a mirror, obviously. But like, say you didn't have a mirror, so really you don't know what your face looks like, but you can only, and this is a bit of a strange thing to think about, you can only really know what your face looks like when you see somebody else's face. That's the mirror, which is quite interesting, isn't it? So I started to think in this kind of philosophical way a lot of the time, and it brought new insights, you know, to my world about how not to take things for granted, how to be super grateful for like the tiniest little things, like even your nervous system, you know, everything that's running the show, isn't it, really? And we don't see it, we don't know it's there, but we know when it's not working.
It's interesting, isn't it? I talked to Taz about this as well. I don't know anybody who works in the area of work like we do, where you're sort of helping people all day, every day, that hasn't been through something that's really challenged them to their very core. You know, we're not talking about, you know, will I make it to the end of the month financially? We're talking like massive life-changing things. And I do think that it's a gift, isn't it? And it's difficult to explain to somebody. You know, every so often people will say, you know, oh, I really wish you hadn't had to go through that. And I'm like, do you know what? I really don't. And the only thing that I used to think was, I wish Laura hadn't had to go through that, because obviously she was only 2 and 3 years old when I went through my illness. And it must have made an impact, you know, it must have had an impact on her and the way she sees the world and how she deals with things. But now she's 16, we've actually talked about it quite a lot. And even she's glad that she went through it, because she knows that she's a different person because of it. She knows that, you know, she is more compassionate, that she understands things better. It deepened our relationship, even though she was only a toddler, because she learned to notice when I was tired or when I was run down or when I was in pain, and she still picks up on that now. And she's really grateful for it. So that these massive things can be such a blessing, even though at the time, you know, if somebody said to us, you know, you're going to be really pleased about this one day, we'd be like, I don't think so. But they really can.
I think me and you would have seen that as well. I think we get to this point where we just know that there is nothing that's happening that's bad. That's just a label, you know. Even pain isn't bad. It's actually a really useful signal. If we didn't have it, we would be really upset about that, because we'd be like putting our hand on the stove and just to hear it sizzle, you know. And you know, that's probably not the best thing to do, right? So we sometimes just sort of try to avoid pain or try to anaesthetize ourselves from it, or we don't want to be uncomfortable because we don't like it. But once you learn that you've been that uncomfortable, you've been in pain, you've had sort of trauma, whatever it is. I mean, I'm not advocating it, obviously. I'm not like a sort of masochist or anything.
No. And you wouldn't wish it on somebody else either, would you? You know, we still do try to avoid these things if we can.
Yeah, but actually human nature is like, my dad used to say to me, why don't you learn the easy way? Why don't you learn from someone else's mistakes? You know, why do you have to learn the hard way? And I think I'm not alone in learning the hard way. I think we all learn from our own stuff, you know, and that's the way of learning, because it means something to us, you know, and it affected us. So therefore it's going to be a learning that we have. And so sometimes there is this hole that we can fall into, but the deeper you go, I think the more yeah, the more you've got to fight to climb out. And in that is there where you discover your strengths, your resources, your skills, things you never knew you had.
Yeah. And that leads on really nicely, because obviously these interviews are called The Superwoman Life, because I am a firm believer that everybody has got an inner superhero, or an inner hero at least. So I'm just intrigued, Dipti, what makes somebody a hero in your eyes?
Oh, that's such a good question. What makes somebody a hero in my eyes? Toby's my hero. So the qualities that Toby has, I suppose, would be, so it's someone who's there for you. So it's not about, someone who's strong or, can rush around and get you out of a hole. It's more of a kind of personal quality for me. So it feels like somebody who can listen, who can who does what they say they're going to do. So someone you can trust, someone you can connect with. And when you say sort of the words like love, I think love is a very individual feeling. Like I know what I mean by love, but other people might have a different definition of what that word would mean for them. So it's hard for me to say someone you love, but someone you just can rely on. Yeah, that's a hero.
That is definitely a hero. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I quite like the kind of, Marvel Avengers type films. And the times when they're in crisis and they don't show up, that's when everything goes wrong, isn't it? In the sort of classic superhero films and comics, as soon as they aren't reliable, as soon as they don't keep to their word, that's when, all hell breaks loose, doesn't it? All the bad guys come out and, everything goes to pot. And I think the same's true for everybody, isn't it? As soon as somebody lets you down, as soon as somebody says that they're going to do something and then they don't turn up, or they don't do it the way they said they would, or by the time they said they would, that's when things start to fall apart, isn't it?
It really is. And I think and like you say, we've all got this inner superpower or superheroism as human beings. And I found this acronym that I always think about when I think about the word human. And so H stands for, so these are the qualities that we all need, I think, as human beings. So H stands for being heard. We all need to feel heard. U stands for being understood. We really like it when we're understood and not misunderstood. M, we want to be managed in some way. So whether it's self-management or being told what to do, just so we got a good boundary going on. So heard, understood, managed. A, acknowledged. We really like to feel acknowledged. And then N, needed. We all really like being needed. And so when you've got all of those qualities, I think that's your inner superhero.
What a great list.
Thanks.
Yeah. So you mentioned Toby. Do you have any other heroes?
Ooh. Do I have any? So do you mean like famous people or
anybody? Yeah.
I think my people who I really respect and admire. So the David Newton, who taught me hypnotherapy, he's one of my, up there. There were lots of people like that who really left a mark on my life, in a good way, and have really kind of seen me. And I think it is just people who see me for who I am. Usually people will say things like parents, and my parents have died, so I should say my parents, but I don't feel that I feel my dad maybe, but he didn't really see me. He tried to tell me to do something else or be someone else, because he was seeing his version of what I should be. And I'm not saying he was a bad dad at all, and they weren't. They were amazing parents, but they didn't see this Dipti. You know, they wanted Dipti to be a lawyer. Can you imagine?
Interesting. It's fascinating though, isn't it? Because as you say, an awful lot of people do list their parents.
Mm-hmm.
And you might assume that if somebody doesn't see their parents as heroes or role models, at least, that they haven't got a good relationship with them. And that's not necessarily the case, is it? You know?
I had a brilliant relationship with them. I absolutely loved them both. And, you know, I hold my hands up to, you know, what they did for me and all of this. But they didn't see me. And to me, that isn't hero. That is, I don't really know what that is. Parents, they're parents.
Yeah. I think for a lot of people, and I mean, certainly for children up to a certain age, our parents just come in a totally different bracket to anybody else, don't they? You know, they're not even people until we get probably into our 20s, or at least, you know, mid to late teens. They're just figureheads who have a role to play.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
you know, it's their job to provide for us and to care for us, and we don't think about the fact that they're individuals with their own choices and decisions to make.
And because my dad died when I was early 20s, I didn't really grow up enough to see him for who he was either, because he was that figurehead, like you say. So I think obviously it sort of stopped there. But then I don't have enough memory bank for it to update, which is a really interesting concept, isn't it?
It's interesting as well, though, because I think when we talk about heroes, a lot of people assume that we're going to immediately reach for the big names, you know, the actors, the Oprah Winfreys, the Steve Jobs, you know, those sorts of level of people that everybody would recognize. And yet what I'm learning more and more just from talking to people is that actually the people who are the real heroes are the people that we know, the people who make an impact on our lives, not that are changing the world. They don't have to be out there, you know, shouting their message. They don't have to have written a book. They don't have to be, you know, on the telly 24/7. They don't have to be in the gossip mags. They just have to be there for you. That's the important thing, isn't it?
And that's it, isn't it? And they're, you know, they don't all wear capes. Yeah. So it's really, really amazing.
So if I was to say to you, what do you think your superhero strength is? What's your superpower, Dipti?
You're asking some good questions. Wow. And I love the fact that you never even told me what you were going to ask, so I haven't got like a lovely ready-made answer. I've got to really think on my feet, which is great.
It's got to be real, yeah.
Yeah, I love doing that. Right, so my superpower is my ability to flow.
That's a good one.
I can just, you know, like if I could do it with my body, I'd get into like wibbly wobbly flow mode and just flow. So that's, I could just be called Flo.
Oh, well, that's what I'll call you from now on.
Tait.
Kind of suits you.
Flo Tait, yeah.
And your hair flows.
Yeah.
It all kind of works.
Yeah, that's it. Change my name. But I like the name Dipti. What about Dipti? No, it doesn't go.
So how do you use that power, that ability to flow, to help yourself and to help other people?
So, for example, with therapy, I do something called, which is a signature thing that Dipti Flow has figured out herself, and it's free flow trance. So I don't use language patterns like a lot of hypnotherapists would read language patterns to their clients. So what happens with my sessions is that I listen to the client's words after asking them the solution focused questions. And then I've got kind of what I call fingerprints. So they're just a few little words on my piece of paper. And then using those words, I flow my own language pattern on the fly, flowing fly. So it's like a rap, it's a hypno rap.
Wow.
I can do that for about 45 minutes or an hour. I can just keep going and going and going. So that's my my way of using flow.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it is a good skill.
Because you channel quite a lot as well, don't you? Whether consciously or unconsciously.
Yeah, I suppose you could call it, in a sort of up the fluffy end, we call that channeling. I don't know what the science end is called then. What do you think?
I don't know. There must be a term for it, mustn't there? Unless they just don't acknowledge it as a thing and it, you know, it's rationalized away. I don't know.
Well, I suppose in a way, if I talk about it in like this sort of neuroscience, applying it to how the brain works, if you get into a trance, which is actually, you don't have to be, you know, in a weird state, you just have to sort of get into that totally internally relaxed place, you always know what to say and how to say it. And it's our philosophy is that it's the stress or the worry that puts the blocks into that flow state. So actually they would call it a flow state. Yeah. I think that's what they do call it.
That makes perfect sense as well, doesn't it? You know, when you think about people who struggle with public speaking or with interviews, it's getting into that stressed, anxious state of mind that makes you trip over your words, makes you use the wrong words, you know, that makes you
forget your words.
Yeah, just completely lose them. They just go completely out of your head, don't they? So that makes complete sense that, you know, you've got to be in that flow state to be able to, you know, just speak and make sense.
Yeah, and just trust yourself, I guess. It's about knowing that, you know, when I start a therapy session, I have in front of me a blank piece of paper. There's no structure. And I don't think, I don't know what to ask my client. I know what to ask them because I get into flow first. And it doesn't have to be in therapy either. It's like, actually, if you get into flow with whatever you do is going to come from a place that is very authentic and very meaningful, and the interaction that you get is amazing because you're really there with that person, fully present, fully engaged, and fully yourself, and then that brings out the qualities of that in the other person, and it's just really lovely.
Yeah. And it's not just speech either, is it, that happens? You know, when we're writing,
yeah.
You know, if you're writing a blog or when you're writing your book, you just, you know, you get into that state and you blink and 3 hours have passed because you've just been in that state where everything just comes and you're not thinking about it consciously anymore.
Exactly. And like with Ian, you know, your husband Ian, that one, you know, him. You know, like I would imagine that if he's writing lyrics, you know, or even jamming, you know, and if he's just in his own head and stressed, there's going to be blocks.
Yeah.
But as soon as he gets into flow, there's artistry, creativity, innovation. Yeah. You know, it's music, it's art, it's creative, it's writing, it's speaking. You know, it's all of these things, isn't it?
I know Ken Robinson talks about a similar thing. He talks about, you know, people just being in their, I can't think of the word that he uses. I'm not stressed and it's gone, Dipti. He talks about, you know, people being in the zone. He doesn't say in the zone, but, you know, once you get to that point, and he talks about, you know, children and how, you know, we pigeonhole children, and actually some of them just want to be able to dance around the classroom while they're trying to remember their times tables, and then they'd be able to do it, or, you know, they need to be drumming or you know, playing with something. And I think that's something that in schools people are becoming a lot more aware of.
That's so good.
You know, in certain environments, whether it's all going to go out the window with the way that schools are having to reopen, I don't know, but I know a lot of teachers were starting to use, more flexible seating, and they were, allowing sort of fidget spinner type gadgets and, that sort of thing to allow kids to be doing something all the time. Because a lot of kids do need that to trigger that state where they can just get into it and understand what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly, because the daydream state was seen as an unproductive state. Well, it's not seen favourably in schools or in, the office. But when you're casually looking out the window, you're in a trance, and that's when your brain is literally taking on all the learning.
Yeah.
And so don't get someone out of a trance, keep them in it, and it looks like they're bored or it looks like they're absent, but they're not. They're fully engaged in their subconscious, and that's really where you want the learning to sit,
Yeah.
And so doodling, another thing. When you're
doodling, an awful lot of people doodle, don't they?
Mm-hmm. And doodling is a way of, it's a trance-like state as well.
I've just remembered the word, Dipti. He talks about people being in their element.
Yes.
That's his way of phrasing it. And I think that's such a lovely way to put it, because we talk about people being in their element all the time, don't we, when they're enjoying themselves?
Yeah.
But it gives a slightly different spin to it.
And you did a brilliant thing just then. You showed, while I was talking, you showed that you weren't really focusing on the word. It just popped into your head. And that's because you were relaxed and you kind of let it go.
Yeah.
And that's how the brain works.
And it's why we can always think of exactly the right thing to say after we've come out of that stressful situation, isn't it? Somebody attacks you and you want to say something really witty back. And you always think of it 2 days later while you're in the shower.
And if you could just rewind, you'd be so sassy all the time. Yeah, I know. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? But that's it, isn't it? It's just recognizing, that is a skill. How do I stay that internally relaxed? But people have a misconception of the word relaxed. They think if you're super relaxed, you don't care, or you're demotivated, or you can't be bothered. No, if you're actually super relaxed internally, I don't mean like lying on a beach in Thailand, because obviously if you were lying on a beach in Thailand, you probably wouldn't get up and do your backhand. But when you're super relaxed inside your body, then you've engaged the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the opposite of fight, flight, freeze. You can't be relaxed and stressed at the same time. It's just not possible. So obviously, if you learn to relax more and more and more, even when you find yourself in a stressful situation, you will still approach that situation with presence. It's not like, oh yeah, that tiger. Yeah, it's quite sweet, isn't it? I might invite it to tea. I've read The Tiger That Comes to Tea. Where are the scones? Let me get them out. You'll be like, oh, there's a tiger. I might need to take some action.
Yeah.
And then it's fine to go into fight, flight, or freeze then, because there's an imminent
threat. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, if everything's a tiger in your life and you're running your life in that high alert state, then your brain it learns this is normal, this level of stress is normal, and then it sort of amps up your stress bucket. So then anything else that comes in will just easily tip you over.
Yeah. And the other thing is, we lose our creativity, don't we, as well, at that point?
Yeah.
I mean, how often do you have people who are self-employed and they're desperately pushing and pushing and pushing, trying to build their business, and they don't take any time off and they don't step away from it at all because they're totally consumed?
That's me.
And yet, no, it's not. But then, like, we all know, don't we, that, you take a week's holiday and you're supposed to be sat there relaxing and switching off from work, and you've got nothing but amazing ideas popping into your head about what you're going to do when you get back to work. Because as soon as you get into that relaxed state and you really embrace it, and you're away from your usual environment, and you've got that time to really breathe, that's when everything fires up, and that's when you get all these amazing ideas.
I know, and that is the power of the brain, isn't it? But I take it a step further, and I think, well, what if I did work? I mean, I do work all the time, but because if I could rename my work a different word, I would just call it purpose, And so I'm not working, I'm just living on purpose. And I do that 14, 15 hours, well, however long I'm awake, whatever. I wake up at, say, 7, I'm at the desk at 8, and I don't finish till 10 p.m. And I do that every day. And I'm absolutely full of energy. I don't need he's right, I don't need a holiday, David Newton. He knew what he was talking about.
But sometimes it's still good for you.
I've got meningitis.
That's why you don't take a break, because you're scared. You need to do some work on that, Dipti.
What I'm saying is I don't get tired out, and I don't think, oh, I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
I'm not, I'm not, because I don't see my work as stressful. I don't get stressed ever, unless there's really good reason to get stressed. We talked about the mask before we started, didn't we? Of Corona. And I was telling you that because I've been self-isolating since March, so I haven't really been out since.
That's why you're working all the time.
Nothing else to do. And so I decided to try out the supermarket the other day. And so I put my mask on, and it reminded me of when I couldn't smile. Going back to that. Nice link, Dipti. Well done.
Nice circle.
So because I couldn't see other people's faces either, and also I couldn't obviously express that I was smiling, it immediately took me back to the 7 years ago. And I was really shocked at that, because I thought I'd parked it, I thought I'd processed it, I thought it was fine. But clearly there's something still there, because it really did shake me up. And so it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. Some of these things that we go through, I mean, I know we've talked about the fact that, they can be a blessing, but actually I don't know whether we ever completely understand how deeply they affect us. There, some of the psychological implications for something like not being able to move your face, you can do a lot of work on that and still not quite get to the bottom, can't you?
Yeah. And so I think at some level you've got to accept that there has been it's the psychological scar, really, an emotional scar.
Yeah.
So, like if you have an operation, you're left with a scar. So it's the same. If it affects you that deeply, you're kind of going to be left with a scar. But, it's only a scar. And scar tissue can, subside a little bit, but you're still left with something. And I think it's important to remember that. And it's not about just going, well, we learn stuff, we grow, we're a stronger person, we haven't died, so, it's made us stronger. Yeah, there's all that as well. But then you have to also, hold your emotional state and be kind to yourself, and remember that there might be some element of grief there that you need to kind of hold. It's not about getting rid of it or trying to ignore it. It's about holding the space for it as well.
Well, and there's always going to be something, isn't there? If we think about, having children, you might have stretch marks, you might have scars from that. You wouldn't change those for anything, because without them, you wouldn't have your children. Yeah. And it's the same thing, isn't it? We almost need that emotional scar to remind us how blessed we are now, and to keep bringing us back to that every so often. Not that we want to be constantly dwelling in that, past state, but it's really easy as time goes on for it to get smaller and smaller and smaller, and for us to forget that actually we've been through it.
Yeah.
And it's almost sort of a little wake-up call and a little reminder that actually, that was us that went through that difficult time, and look how strong we are, and look how well we've come through it, and look how blessed we are now, because we're living the life that we are.
And we're still here to tell the tale, you know,
Absolutely.
we're still here to share the story. And for someone else, that could be an inspirational gift, you know. So, yes, I think life's lovely, isn't it?
It's amazing. Thank you so much, Dipti. Honestly,
Okay.
I've really
Thank
enjoyed
you.
talking to you, and I'm so glad you've got your smile back, because it's such
Thank
a beautiful smile. So I'm going to wrap up now. Would you like to just tell people where they can find you if they want to get in touch, or if they want to stalk you on social media and things?
Stalk me. I already have a stalky cat. I don't need a human stalker. She's called Fluffy. She's weird. So anyway, forget Fluffy. Right, what are we doing? Social media. So my website is my name. It's quite simple, diptitait.com. And then my therapy website is thecotswoldpractice.com. Twitter, Dipnotherapy. Instagram, Dipnotherapy. That's about it, I think.
It's been so fabulous talking to you. Thanks ever so much for giving me your time. I really appreciate it.
Me. Thanks.
It's been so lovely. And yeah, I'll be back to do another one of these interviews in the future. I'm not sure when in the future. But yeah, I'm really loving talking to everybody, because at the minute I'm talking to people that I know quite well, which is amazing. And reminding myself just how special they are and how lucky I am to have them in my life, which is such a blessing. But I think it's important for us to all remember that, you know, sometimes things do feel difficult, but we can all choose to be our own hero, you know, and we really can. So thank you, Dipti. It's been really lovely.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.